ahead and mute. And then if you, of course, with any questions or comments that are related to the parsha, that would be great. So hello, Darlene, and hello, Riva, and Liz, and Trudy, and Linda, and Jerry, and Kathy, and Carol. So nice to see you all. Really lovely. Okay, let's start with our blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Welcome to our parsha class this week. This week, America is on the parsha of Korach. Israel is moving ahead to the parsha of Hutt. But I love getting I feel like I'm double dipping. I get to go back and have it again. So Parsha Korach, we are also we had Rosh Chodesh, was yesterday and the day before. We are now in Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, and or in the month of Tammuz. We are in what are the summer months of the Jewish calendar. So we're in the summer months. So it's interesting. We want to understand that, and the class today is being taken from the works of Rabbi Moshe Wolfson. I so appreciate it. I shared in the email that I learned some fascinating things. I'm so excited to share it with you, to see not only what insights we can learn about the parsha, but also how it impacts us and what we can be thinking about as well. So he makes a comment and says, until we get to the summer months in the Torah readings, we have stories, and our narrative is about people like the good guys and the bad guys, starting from Bereshit. You got Adam and Eve and the snake. Okay, so you got definitely good and bad. Then we have Noah and the rest of the world. Then we have Abraham and the rest of the world. We have Yitzchak and Ishmael. We have Jacob and Esau. We have the Jewish people and the Egyptians. We have Moshe and Pharaoh. It's very clear who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. It's much more like how most popular culture runs when you go to a movie, read a book, or anything like that. It's like the good guys and the bad guys, and hopefully in the end, the good guys win. He said there's a very marked difference that you notice as soon as we get to the parshas in the summer. The summer months, the parshas start off with good people going off track, of good people doing wrong things and making mistakes. So we have the example of Miriam, who speaks Lashon Hara, who's gossiping about her brother Moshe. Well-intended, she loves him, the whole thing, but we know it was the wrong thing because she's struck with Sarat. So she is a great, righteous person who does the wrong thing. And then we have the Meraglim, the spies who were sent into the land of Israel. They were also, it said that they were men of stature, men of renown. They were great tzaddikim, and they erred terribly. And then we have Korach this week. And Korach, it says he was a great person. He was a Torah scholar. He was a leader. It says he was the wealthiest person of all of the Jewish people. Not that that makes you a great person, but he happened to also be wealthy. That there's a saying that says he's as rich as Korach. So it says like he was very wealthy, and he was of the tribe of Levi. He was related to cousins with Moshe and Aaron. He was the tribe of Levi, and he was in the family that carried all of the holy objects, the Aron Kodesh, the holy ark, the menorah, the shulchan, all the things that were like the most important things. From the family of Hutt, he was in that family. So he was like at the top of the top, and he had Ruach HaKodesh. He had divine inspiration. So much so that he was able to see into the future to know that he was going to have very great descendants. One of his greatest descendants was the prophet Samuel. The prophet Samuel is a descendant of Korach, and every Friday night, as part of the davening, we talk about Moshe and Aaron and Samuel. It says that Shmuel was equal to Moshe and Aaron. And that from Korah's perspective, is like, I'm a great person. Look who my descendant is. Samuel was a prophet, a judge. He's the one he was the leader of the Jewish people until the crowning of King Saul and of King David. He was the leader of the Jewish people. So, and much beloved, very beloved by the Jewish people. So this is who Korach was. This is, and then what happened? What happened to Korach? So before we go into that, so we're going to talk about why is this so in the summer? Why all of a sudden in the summer months are the Torah parshas about people who are great people who go off track? So that there's something about the summer months, and you might be able to relate to this personally, or if you have children, or if you were a teacher having students or anything like that, is that when there is a summer mentality, which is, it's summer, it's vacation. It says summertime is a time when people tend to let down their guard. That's just more relaxed. It was interesting. There was an article online that talked about suggesting that the airlines impose some sort of a dress code on people who fly, that when you travel, you should be dressed. And they are attributing the sloppy dress to some of the very bad behavior that has been exhibited on flights. So that when people are just kind of basically wearing their pajamas and flip-flops, they're just not necessarily going to be at their best. I'm not saying you're not at your best or that I'm not at my best, but there is this kind of let down your guard and just be. And that just be can cause a problem. So summer was meant to be a culmination. The word for summer is kaitz. It's related to the word kates, and kates means like the grand finale. So we know with the story of the spies that the Jewish people were meant to have left Egypt 49 days later, stand at Mount Sinai, get the Torah, build the Mishkan, go into the march into the land of Israel. Moshe would be the king, they'd build the Beit HaMikdash, and the Jewish people would live happily ever after. That was plan A until the spies. And then we know when that was Tisha B'Av, during the month of Av. That was meant to be the high point. The summer was meant to be the high point. Whenever we are at a moment with something that's meant to be a high point, there have to be, like for the balance of trade, for the balance in the world, there have to be offsetting negative impulses that are also coursing through at the same time, because we have to have free choice on which side to associate with. Is it going to be the negativity or is it going to be positive? So summer, which is meant to be the grand finale when we are at our strongest, is often the time when we are at our weakest. People travel and they decide they're not really keeping things the way they used to. We know when people even go to a conference that they let down their guard and their behavior and do things that they wouldn't consider doing if they were in town, that people just kind of go off. So it says this is the time of summer. And so we come with these parshas of great people during the summer parshas, reminding us that even the greatest of the great people can slip up, and can slip up a lot, especially in these summer times. So the month of Tammuz, which we are now in, is that time that we're seeing an alignment here of stories and time, just the general summertime, and to take note of that. So our son Binyamin was giving a final class to the boys before they left yeshiva to go back to their homes. And interestingly, one of the things he told them was, when you travel, you should look like a mensch. You shouldn't look like somebody just woke you up and, dragged you out of bed. And he said, first of all, you're yeshiva bachers. People are judging you based on how you look, and you need to look respectable and presentable and not like ditch all of your year's effort. And now you're on vacation, you're going home. And so it's, but it's such a long trip. It's like, it is a long trip, but you're going to be dressed in clothes anyway. So nothing says it has to be like tight pants or tight whatever. It's just like, be a mensch and be dressed. So this is the time of summer, is to make sure we counter our relaxed state with a sense of also wanting to be able to maintain our personal dignity and regard and attention to the things that we value the other 9 months of the year that we value then. We know, like from school, that I see people here who were school teachers, to know that, what happens to students over the summer, and like what you have to catch up with when you started back in school the fall is like, I forgot everything. Like you spend the first months like catching up. This is the time to not lose ground during this summer months. So that was the first piece that he wanted to share. The second is We want to talk about Korach, that Judaism, the Torah has a much more nuanced approach to people and to process. And we talk about Korach, it says that he was this great person, and we're going to talk about his error, which was just a fascinating approach to what his mistake was. But first we have to know, you might be familiar with the song, Tzadik Katamar Yifrach Yifrach, Tzadik Katamar Yifrach, or a different melody, Tzadik Katamar Yifrach. Okay, Tzadik Katamar Yifrach. A tzaddik, a righteous person, Katamar is like a date palm tree. Yifrach, it will flourish. It means to blossom, to continuously blossom. Tzadik Katamar Yifrach, a righteous person will blossom. It says, interestingly, that phrase is associated with Korach. If you take the word Tzadik, it ends with a kuf. If you take the word Katamar, it ends with a resh. And if you look at the word Yifrach, it ends with a chet. That spells kuf, resh, chet, spells Korach. Tzadik Katamar Yifrach is considered connected to Korach. But a lot of times when we've looked at different words, it's interesting that it's the last letter of each of those words. It's not the first letter. Okay, so he represents the last, what happens in the future. Tzadik Katamar Yifrach, it says that was Korach. What do we know about Korach? It says that he argued with Moshe. As anybody's familiar that wants to unmute and share, what were some of the arguments that Korach made? We're looking on page 821. So there's the text, and then there are the commentaries and midrashim that talk about what Korach's argument was. So on page 821, we'll say here, we'll look at just what the text is. Chapter 16, verse 3. Chapter 16, verse 3 of Bamidbar, of Numbers, says, they gathered together against Moses and against Aaron and said to them, it's too much for you. For the entire assembly, all of them are holy, and Hashem is among them. Why do you exalt yourselves over the congregation of Hashem? It's like, who made you in charge? All the Jewish people are holy. Why are you exalting yourself? Why are you being the leader over us? But then it goes through and says that he had a number of different arguments. Does anyone recall any of the arguments that Korach made? He makes a couple of statements. This again is in the midrash, not in the text itself. Riva, do you remember? I'm going to sign you up.
He wanted to be the boss.
He
wanted to be the leader. Yeah, but more than that, I don't have it in front of me.
Okay, Darlene or anybody else remember, what was it that Korach said? He gave examples.
Was he making arguments? I don't know if this is off track. Like if you have a home svarim, do you still have to have a mezuzah, or is it enough that you have svarim? Or if you
exactly, that's exactly said. If you have a whole room full of svarim of chumashim, you're telling me you have to put a mezuzah on the door? And then Etta, were you going to offer something else as well?
Yes. He accused him of nepotism. You got your brother, you got your nephew, you're picking people, and you should have picked me. You're prejudiced.
You're prejudiced, yes. So we're going to talk about that too, because he was jealous about that. And in addition, just going back to the other idea about the mezuzah, he also said, and if you have a garment that's completely blue, like Beth Ann's shirt, you're telling me you have to put on tzitzis, you have to have a blue thread, and Moshe's yes. So all of these questions are, you telling me if the whole thing is the thing that you say is holy, why do you have to have another little thing that says it's more holy? It's like, that doesn't make any sense. So it says that he actually had further arguments, which were, if all of the land of Israel is holy, do you need to have Yerushalayim? You don't need to have a city that's more holy. And even more than that, you don't have to have Shabbos, because all the days are holy. It's all Shabbos. Now, before we say like, oh, that's really crazy, it sounds like he's really off the path. When we say in Birkat HaMazon on Shabbat, we specifically say that it'll be a Yom Shekulo Shabbos, that it will be a time when all the days will be like Shabbos. Marsha.
I think was she first, the woman at the end, but whatever. Is this the beginning of our revisionists who change our Jewish laws to kind of make it fit the society we're in?
No, that this is a different thing. So what he's saying is that there doesn't need to be something special, but hold your thought, because he is talking about something else that's not revisionism. It's another idea, which is fundamentally Korach has an argument, which is it's true. The Jewish people are all holy, because what did we tell? God told the Jewish people, you are a mamlechet kohanim. You are a nation, a kingdom of kohanim. You're all priests. So how come it has to be somebody else in charge? Why do they have to be leaders? Why do you have to have Techelet? Why do you have to have Shabbos? Why do you have to have Yerushalayim? So the argument he's making is has legitimacy. Now here's the challenge. That argument represents a future time. In the future, it says, in the future, the land of Israel will all have the status of Yerushalayim. Everything will be elevated. Not only that, it says the Leviim, the Levites will all be elevated, and they'll be like the Kohanim. So much so that in the future, during a resurrection, I don't know exactly how this is going to work, Aaron will be the Kohen Gadol, and he will be co-Kohen Gadol with Korach. Korach and Aaron will be Kohane Gadolei, wherever you say that, they will be co-Kohanim Gadolim there together, because they represent two different things. Korach's mistake was a mistake of many people throughout the centuries who want to skip to the Kates. They want to get to the end game of their vision of humanity without going through the steps. If you take a look at all of the different isms, socialism, communism, whatever it might be, the people who created these movements were not saying, my goal is to be cruel, despotic, and ruin the world. All of them thought that they were going to be doing something good. They were going to be calling on the highest level. How could it be bad? Like everyone's going to share everything that they have. It'll all be equal. That's amazing. Equality, that sounds great. But it represents an end game. It represents the Kates. It represents the last letter of the word, not the first. So that when Korach comes to Moshe and is saying this, Moshe's argument to him is like, this is too much. And he says to him, Rav Lechem, you are too much. The world is not ready for a Korach. And so what happens to Korach is that he's swallowed back into the earth. Now I ask you, unless you're making a movie where you're looking for something really dramatic, why would you go into swallowing, the earth swallowing you up? We have plagues, we have fire, we have Nadav and Abihu, that their souls are sucked out of them. We have, plagues, we had 10 of them that worked really well in Egypt. We have all sorts of things, never mind just like instant death. But why the putting into the ground? So the idea is being swallowed up into the ground. Again, this could be looked at many, many different ways, is actually could be understood as an idea of planting, because what do you put into the ground? You put a seed into the ground, and the seed is not ready for prime time. It has to blossom. So now we go back to our tzaddik hatamar yifrach. A righteous person will be like a palm tree and it will blossom. It says, and that's Korach. So he's not ready now, but he will be in the future. That approach does have merit. So much so, nobody I know, I've never been to a bris when anyone announced that they were naming their child Korach. I have to say, we haven't gone that far because we don't really want to bring that energy out yet. However, there are people who trace their lineage happily to Korach. And let's see, I just wrote down some of the names. Let me just tell you here. Some of these may not mean anything to you, that some of these names here. Where's my list of people? Hold on 1 second. I just want to share this because some of them you might recognize. The Shlah HaKodesh, who's one of the great commentators. He's actually buried next to the Rambam in Tveria. the Jose of Lublin, which is the seer of Lublin, Rav Shmelka of Nikolsburg, who I don't really know, used to, and the Jose of Lublin used to refer to Korach as the Heilige Zaidi. Heilige means holy, the holy grandfather Korach. Be like, are you kidding? Skeleton in my closet. It's like, no, Korach, because of what he represented, was this idea of what will be at the end. But to recognize that there is a process that we have to go through first, and that the process requires the Aaron process to be in charge rather than Korach. Why is that? Aaron, as we know, is from the side of compassion. It says, you should be like Aaron, you shall seek peace and you shall pursue it. He loved peace, he loved people, he was compassionate, he was understanding. This process of humanity perfecting itself requires a very long-term perspective, a willingness to let go through a process of trial and error as individuals and the world comes to a realization, a recognition of what it is they should be doing. If you have a gevura, which Korach represents gevura, strength and boundaries of the Levi'im, of the Levites, if you have that ruling, you will have destruction. It says until the end, Aaron has to be on top with the Levites right under. In the end, they'll be able to go side by side and they can be co-Kohanim. But until then, there has to be the compassion first. So think about that in terms of growth of a child. Can you imagine saying to a baby, okay, get up right now. Why are you waking me up? Go get your cereal, get dressed, and get yourself to school. It's like, that's insane and horrible. And hopefully social services would come and take your child away from you if you did something like that. It's like, no, and I cuddle you and you're a baby, and you have changing expectations as a child goes through different stages. But to have a gevura, to have too much strictness over a child, over a nation, over humanity at the wrong time will only result in cruelty, because then you'll have to punish people who are not doing what they're supposed to do. Then you get a totalitarian state where they lock you up if, you know, whatever, you're doing something against the state. You end up with a distortion instead of the perfection that you want. So if you do any study of all the utopian ideas, they all became despotic and cruel and destructive, because that really the world can't do that, cannot have that perspective until we go through a process. Korach represents the end when things will be in this different place. But this also tells us about ourselves. Being a person is not so easy. Growing is not so easy. Spiritual development is not so easy. Getting through the day is not so easy. And it says, like, what does it take? It says it takes someone like an Aaron perspective of the compassion and love and gentleness and the yielding in order to help us flourish. Until then, until we get to a state when we are truly finished and we're really ready for prime time, which would be Mashiach, we're not going to be ready to have such a harsh place, which is what Korach would have brought to the world.
Excuse me, Ellyn,
Yes.
just a question. So was it the difference between the Torah and the oral law that he was questioning? Where definitely Torah came from Moshe. He brought down the Luchos, but was he questioning like the fact that Hashem also gave the oral law to Moshe?
Yeah, no, thank you. That he was not questioning that, because actually the commandment for tzitzis and techelet is in the written Torah. That's not the oral law. So he was not questioning that, as is mezuzah. So all of that is clear, just right in the text. So that he wasn't questioning. He had a philosophical question. And now to go to what you said, which was about the jealousy, that he wanted to be in charge. So his argument is, everybody's holy, so why are you promoting yourself? And Moshe sees right through it and says he was jealous. So who was he really jealous of? Or when does his jealousy start? you could see part of his jealousy is the fact that he does have a high up position as a Levi. The fact that amongst the Levite families, he's in the family that carries the ark and the menorah and the shulchan instead of the planks of wood. He is so close because the Levites, it's very interesting. They carried those items, but they could not look at them while they were disassembled. So it's a very interesting thing. It's like, okay, I'm going to have to carry it, but I can't look at it. So they couldn't look at it. They could only carry it. But the Kohanim could look at it. So he was like a runner-up. And the first runner-up in any pageant is always the one who's most likely to do violence to the winner. It's not the person who comes in third, fourth, fifth, or is sitting at home watching it on TV. So it's like Korach was like in a runner-up position, but his jealousy started earlier than that. It started way back in a section that we usually don't even pay so much attention to, which is that when the leaders of each of the tribes were appointed, his younger relative was appointed rather than him. So where do we see that? We're going to see that in a second on page 741. So if you want to go into your Chumash on page 741, I'll tell you the chapter and verse here in a moment. 741 is the Bamidbar, chapter 3, and it's going to be verse 27. So listen to this. It's again, we tend to just totally gloss over this. Hutt, verse 27, had the family of the Amramites, that's Amram, that's Moshe and Aaron and Miriam's father, the family of Izharites, the family of Hebronites, and the family of Uzzielites. These were the Kohathite families. So let's take the ites off there, and we have Izhar, Hebron, and Uzziel. Now these are listed in age order. So who's the oldest? Izhar is the oldest, then Hebron, and then Uzziel. Okay, so that is the youngest one. But we have a problem, which is, if you go to page, hold on one second. 8, if you go back to chapter 3, verse 27, no, that's not right. Page 741. When you look at the, did I not write this down? Hold on, see if I have the page. That when the family that was put in charge, the family that was put in charge was Uzziel, someone from the family of Uzziel, which was the youngest. If you look at who Korach is, let's go back forward to Korach, and we will see Korach specifically. It says, page 821, this is chapter 16, verse 1. Korach, son of Izhar, son of Kahat, son of Levi. Korach was from the oldest son of Kohat, and the person in charge of the tribe of Levi was a younger from the tribe of Uzziel. And he was like, well, wait a minute. I'm not Moshe, I'm not Aaron, and now like the youngest person is in charge of the tribe. That was coming to me. As soon as we have this in Hebrew, it's called Zemagieli, it's coming to me. I deserve it. I'm entitled to it. Whenever we have that, even if he didn't say anything at the time, it's because Moshe was so beloved that he didn't want to like he knew he couldn't rebel against Moshe directly for that because it would just be unseemly. And so instead he waits, bides his time, and then he stages this whole rebellion. But it says that he didn't even realize he was jealous. He thought he was absolutely justified. Now, that's another challenge that we have, which is whenever we are acting from a place of jealousy, no one ever says, I'm completely unjustified in what I'm thinking and saying. We always say, I'm absolutely justified, and this was a miscarriage of justice. And when we are in that place, and when we say that, that means we're usually in the place of jealousy and doing something wrong. So then that is what happened, and that fueled and it kind of ate away at Korach. Because here's the thing that is challenging to understand. A person can be a great leader. They can have wonderful qualities. They can be wealthy. They can be charismatic. They can have divine inspiration. It doesn't mean they're a perfect person. And they are subject to the same foibles that anybody else is. And he was jealous, but he didn't see it because he was focused on who his descendants were. And his descendants of Samuel and other people other great people, he got sidetracked by that. So the greater a person is, the greater their Yetzer Hara is, the greater their evil inclination, because it's just like the world has to be in balance. So if you see somebody who you perceive as being really great, don't think they've got it made in the shade. They're struggling even more than anybody else. They're really struggling. And what happens in our world is we love to catch great people struggling and point out and kind of, we caught you. So it says the summer months are, we caught you. It's like, but we don't want to have that attitude. It's like, oy, haval, like such a shame that your greatness, that we did not stay on top of it and were sidetracked by your limitations. So Korach is sidetracked by his limitations, but in the end, he's going to come forward. When he comes forward, in the meantime, though, his sons, it says, even though his whole household was swallowed up, it says that his sons did not die. His sons did not die. It says that in fact, the Midrash says that Korach was swallowed up, and we're going to say planted. He was planted. And that a ledge came out, and the sons were sitting on the ledge, and they were saved, and they were singing. And that what they were singing was a song about Moshe, saying, Moshe emet, but Torah to emet. Moshe is truth, and his Torah is truth as well. The descendants of Korach have written Tehillim. They have written psalms that we say. One of the psalms that we say, interestingly, is the psalm that we say before the blowing of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. And that is Psalm 47. Psalm 47, verse 1 is Lamanatseach livnei Korach mizmor. To the conductor, the descendants, the children of Korach, a song. It says, we say it 7 times. People are always saying, keeping count, saying it 7 times before the shofar is blown. It's like, isn't that interesting? Of all the psalms to say before the blowing of the shofar, why do we do that one? Maybe it seems like it would be Psalm 150 when we talk about all of the instruments that are blown and like all the hallelujahs for praising God. You think maybe we would do that one 7 times. It's also shorter, it would take up less time. But we do that Psalm 47, and we do it 7 times with the blowing of the shofar. So why do we do it? It says that this is the psalm that is connected to Teshuvah, because it is from the children of Korach, who did Teshuvah on their father, and in anticipation of their father doing Teshuvah as well. In addition, here's a really interesting little hint here. The first letters, not the last letters, the first letters, or I should say the first letters, they're not going to be in the same order. The first letter is Lamed Atseach, the first letter is Lamed. The next word is Livnei, another Lamed. Korach is a Kuf, and Mem Mizmor. It says, what does that spell? It says those letters can be rearranged to spell Likolam, which means to their voice, to their voice. What is to their voice? We're going to go back into Korach and see that word is mentioned with the destruction of Korach and his family. So let's turn back to page 827. After Korach's family is swallowed up, chapter 16, verse 34. We'll go back and read verse 33. They and all that was there descended alive to the pit. The earth covered them over, and they were lost from among the congregation. All Israel that was around them fled at their sound, for they said, lest the earth swallow us. Now it says they fled at their sound. First of all, at what sound? It says the sound of, you think like, oh, it's the sound of Korach screaming or something. It's like, no, it says it's the sound of Korach's sons singing to God. Now, why would you flee from a song praising God? But that's what it says in the English, but that's not what it says in the Hebrew. So let's take a look at it again. It's chapter 16, verse 34. It says, I'll just read it there. V'chol Yisrael, and all of Israel, asher sevivotehem, that was encircling them, nasu, fled, not mikolam, from their voice. It says nasu lekolam. They fled to the voice. They hurried over, not away. It doesn't say from, it says to. It says, what does that mean? It says, everyone came to hear the teshuvah, to hear the voice of the sons of Korach doing teshuvah and singing shira. Look at that word, likolam. Those were the letters lamed kuf, lamed mem, lamanatseach, livnei Korach, mizmor. Those are the letters that make up the word likolam. This is the teshuvah of Korach's sons, is the very specific teshuvah that we are trying to muster up on Rosh Hashanah before the blowing of the shofar. It's like, if you want to know how, from what depths can Hashem rescue us, that no one should ever think I'm too far gone. Because I'd say Korach's sons represent as gone as you can get and not being gone. If you're already in the earth but not swallowed up, you're pretty far gone. And yet from that place, there is a rescue. And from that place, we have the 7 times repeating this psalm before we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. It's like, this is the time of teshuvah. For sure, nobody should feel that they have gone beyond what Korach's sons did. So we read it at that time. In addition to that, it says, we're also told that Hannah, who was Samuel's mother, and we read that Haftorah also on Rosh Hashanah. So that's interesting too. It's like, how do we end up with all of these Korach connections on Rosh Hashanah? So we read about the birth of Samuel, which means that we're reading Hannah's song. And we also have a reference in her song to Korach. So let's take a look at that. That's going to be at the back of your Chumash. That's going to be on page 1236, which is where the Haftorahs are in the Haftorah for Rosh Hashanah. So let's take a look at that. Page 1236, verse 6. It says Haftorah Rosh Hashanah. And it says here, hold on a second, that's not right. Probably the verse 6. No. Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong page. Sorry. It's at the top of the page. I was looking at second day Rosh Hashanah. Verse 6 at the top of the page on page 1236. And it says, this is in Hannah's song, and it says, Hashem brings death and gives life, lowers to the pit and elevates. It says, what is she talking about? She is talking about the death of Korach and gives life, and Sadiq Katamar Yifrach will blossom again, lowers to the pit, is swallowed by the earth, and then elevates with the birth of Samuel, which is the descendant of Korach. And so we see this tikkun, this major tikkun. People love to talk about tikkun olam. The ultimate tikkun olam is the tikkun of ourselves, of correcting the mistakes, finding the flaws, turning to our greatness, realizing what things need to be in place in order for us to flourish. This is what Hannah is referencing. It's like, now we have a vindication, not a vindication. We see a tikkun of Korach with the birth of Samuel. He lowers to the pit and he raises up. He causes death and he brings back to life. Otherwise, what's Hannah talking about? What is she talking about? So this is considered a reference to Korach. And finally, we see about him, about Korach, that he is going to be the person who represents Mashiach, that he's going to be the person who represents that the project is done. Tzadik Hatamar Yifrach, Korach, the righteous shall flourish like a palm tree. And the way that psalm continues, Tzadik Hatamar Yifrach, it says that there's going to be, Shetulim B'Veit Adonai, that's planted in the house of God. And it continues on and talks about sitting in the courtyards of the Beit HaMikdash. Now, for those of us who haven't seen the Beit HaMikdash, courtyards, inner sanctum, all these different things don't necessarily mean anything, but the courtyard is where the Leviim were. That's where the Levites were, was in the courtyard. It says, the righteous shall flourish like a palm tree planted in the courtyards of the place of holiness. Is sung to talk about that you can flourish in the place where Hashem has put you. You can't say, well, I would be spiritual, I would be this, if I was in the Holy of Holies and if I could be a Kohen, then I would be really amazing. Or if I was in charge, then I would be amazing. Or if I had this position, then I could be great. It says, wherever Hashem puts us and plants us, that is the place where we are supposed to flourish. The songs of Korach, sons, all talk about how much they love being in the courtyard of Hashem. And they don't say that they're pining away trying to get into the Kodesh Kadoshim. They talk about the courtyards. They talk about the beauty of Jerusalem. They talk about the beauty of the place where they are at. It says, and to be able to be present to the circumstances and situations that we are currently in. This doesn't mean that we don't work towards something for the future. It means being able to realize that Hashem has put us in a place where we can flourish exactly where we are. We still daven if we want something else to happen, that's fine, but we're supposed to flourish where we are. It says, Tzadik Hatamar Yifrach, a righteous person flourishes wherever they find themselves. If you've ever read any like of the Hasidic tales of the Holocaust, or even stories of Eastern Europe during times when people were, pogroms or horrible things that people were going through, what people were able to achieve, the spiritual achievements that people were able to gain during those times, they were not fair weather friends of the Torah or fair weather friends of God. In the olden days when I used to cross-country ski, people, especially coming here to Israel, people always say, you come from Colorado, do you ski? And I'm like, we cross-country skied, I did it a long time ago, but I couldn't even really call myself a skier, because I really only like to go if the snow had blue wax, and if it was going to be green or purple or something like that, I'm not interested. Too sticky, too icy, not interested. Blue sky, not windy, not blowy. It just had to be perfect. It says you can't really call yourself a skier if you have so many criteria that have to be met before you'll do it. It says our goal is to have a spiritual connection that stays constant and consistent regardless of the circumstances or situations that we are in. So to be able to be planted wherever we are. So Korach gets forcibly planted where he is because he wasn't happy where he was. And in the future, he gets to sprout and reach his fulfillment, but he doesn't get to be in this world because he wasn't able to stay in it, because he couldn't accept the process that he, the Jewish people, and humanity needed to go through before they got to the Kates, before they got to the summer. So this is a very important period of time that we're in, of these summer months, of working on ourselves and realizing the distance we have to go and the growth we have to achieve, and the flourishing that we can do in the process. And that we should be able to find, regardless of our circumstances, regardless of where we're spending our vacation, that just because you cross the state line doesn't mean that your Yiddishkeit goes out the window. I mean, I've had people tell me before, like, oh, I only do this when I'm in Denver, but if I'm someplace where I don't know anybody, then I do A, B, or C. I'm like, wow, that's kind of interesting. Until I experienced it myself when we used to go to conferences for Steve's work, and we'd be someplace, and for a while we went to conferences that were over Shabbos. It was very hard to observe Shabbos at some of these conferences, mostly because everything's electronic. And I mean, one can do it, and I'm sure people work it out, but got a little lax. It'd be kind of like, nobody knows me here. At the time, nobody would have necessarily known I was Jewish, just kind of fit in. So, but that's not how we're supposed to live our life. It's supposed to be wherever we are supposed to be planted in the house of Hashem. It doesn't say that we are literally standing in the courtyard. It means that we are planting ourselves in Hashem's Torah, in Yiddishkeit, our spiritual identity, and we are fulfilling our potential and growing, compassionately growing as we go through each stage of our lives. So this is Korach, the Heilige Zaydi, the holy grandfather Korach. Don't name your child or your grandchild this name, but we do appreciate and understand that unlike a contemporary movie, a contemporary novel that has the good guys and the bad guys, and it's clear to know what's the difference, and the bad guy is bad and the good guy is good. It says in the Torah, just like in real life, good people make mistakes and good people can grow from those mistakes, and good people often suffer from the mistakes that they do make until they transform. So we see such a beautiful example of that with Korach, so that in that case, it's like one might have thought, why does he merit having the parsha named for him? It's like, you have to be pretty amazing. So he merits having a parsha named for him because of what he represents and what he has to teach us. So as we're on our path of becoming righteous people, to remember Tzaddik Katamar Yifrach, the righteous will flourish like a date palm tree, but that Korach, it's that the last letter, to have the expectation that we have already reached our pinnacle while we're still on the journey is not only unfair and inaccurate, it can cause us to make terrible mistakes with ourselves and with other people if we don't realize where we are at in the journey. So when Moshe says, Rav Lechem, you are too much, you're too much for now. So we have a little bit of a hint of this in Jewish law. We always talk about Hillel and Shammai, right? Hillel and Shammai, and how is the halacha usually almost always follows the ruling of Hillel. So because he was like the more compassionate, more chesed guy. It says when Mashiach comes, guess who we're going to follow? Shammai. He was the more, it says, when he chases the person who comes to him and wants to convert al regel achat, standing on one leg, it says he chases him with a measuring rod. A measuring rod is a measuring stick. It's not that he hit him. He chases him with that. It's like, you need to do things correctly. That's what that means. The most accurate, that's gevura, the most defined, the most accurate. Hillel is like, yeah, I understand what you're saying. Shammai represents the most accurate. It says, in the time to come, says we will rule like Shammai, because he is also right, which is why we don't write him out of the Talmud. It doesn't say, we don't censor it and say, we'll take Shammai out. Why are we even studying Shammai? Because we know we follow Hillel. In the future, we will follow Shammai. So the world is in process. And if the world's in process, that means it's fine that we're in process too. So we are under construction. It's very cute. I don't remember, it was during one of my grandchildren's gans, their preschool, they had did a little play, and they were dressed as builders, and it says, Kan bonim atayatid, here we are building the future. And they were dressed in little paper hard hats and things to show us we're all under construction. We are all under construction. And that is the place where we want to be. And the summer is the time to work on that construction project. I, of course, am very sensitive to construction because we've had 2 construction projects going on in our life. And I cannot believe how chaotic a construction project could be. It's beyond comprehension. Just to tell you, we had our lanai in Florida enclosed, and that was finally done after I don't know how many months. And one of the panes of glass is cracked and has to be reordered and reinstalled. I'm like, this is the project from I don't know where. I'm like, all we wanted was a bathroom and to enclose the lanai. It should have been, I don't know, it's several weeks work, and instead it's 9 months and thousands of dollars. It's crazy. You have to laugh at some point. It's okay, there's some cracks in the construction. Like, okay, I'm going to take this as a message that construction's not easy. What seems like what's the problem? As Korach would say, what's the problem? We're all holy. We're already there. Why isn't this done yet? Which is like, not so fast. We're not there yet. So even in our real world construction projects, things happen, leaks happen, floods happen, glass cracks, wrong tile goes up, all these kind of weird things, because that is the nature of construction. And what can I say? We are all under construction. God willing, we should live to 120 and come out the best versions of ourselves possible. And in the meantime, to keep in mind Korach and to realize that even for him, there was hope. There's hope for us. There's hope for his sons. And we are going to be on the path of soon getting ready for Rosh Hashanah. And to keep in mind, a few months from now, when we recite that psalm, and we're counting on our fingers as they recite that psalm 7 times, that we are trying to access that unique quality of the teshuvah of Korach's children. Thank you very much. And if anybody has any questions, comments, happy to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
I have a question. Do you know about the age, or does it matter, the age of Korach's sons to have had such a maturity that they were able to sing while their father was, were they grandfathers already? Were they it seems like hard to process that piece of what you've said. Like they must have been really mature.
They were really mature. And it's interesting because it says that they were challenged when Moshe, remember Moshe's their relative, not just the leader of the Jewish people. So they also struggled with the respect due to Moshe and the respect due to their father. So they were put in a very untenable position of wait, what do we do? So they went along with their father, but then at the last minute just realized that they were wrong. So I think we also have to understand that their shira wasn't like, yay, dad is getting swallowed up, but that their shira is their complete, unequivocal recognition, because song is always associated with perspective and perception, and of having a total understanding, which is like at the Song of the Sea, or in the future when we say that there'll be a Mizmor Shir Chadash, that there'll be a new song. So song reflects in a heightened awareness, and that's where they were coming from. So more so than a la 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 song, it was like Moshe emet v'Torah to emet. Moshe is true and his Torah is true. And that was the shira that the people were flocking to, not away from, to go be able to hear what that teshuvah was.
Okay. And does it also say about how many people were, because it said Korach and his followers. Is there a number to how many people?
That's a good question. There may be later, but what's interesting is the 250 who joined him were not swallowed up. The 250.
See? Right, because I was under the impression that they were, so I was confused. Okay.
Good question.
So
you actually raised a good question. So here, this will be a good thing to reinforce the idea. The 250 followers, it says that even they had a somewhat legitimate claim, and that which is why they weren't swallowed up, but they were killed. So they weren't swallowed, but they were killed. But the fire pans, because it says that they did something also wrong, which was with the fire pans that were for the Kohanim. But because their intentions had some merit to them, even though they were killed, that Hashem gives Aaron the directions to take the fire pans, to melt them down, and to make a covering for the ark because they were holy. You might think they'd say, holy, they were just used for a rebellion. It's like, don't be so quick. Don't be so quick, because there was a legitimate piece in there where they were right and they desired to come close to Hashem. So this is interesting. It says base people, when they follow their desires, it's usually for just their physical pleasures, and they just go down and down and down. Great people, when they follow their desires, they may get themselves in a heck of a lot of trouble and do the wrong thing, but their desire is to come close to God. They may do it in the wrong way, and they may do something that's against the whatever, but their motivation that there is something holy there. And that's what Hashem is telling Moshe and Aaron. There was something there. Otherwise, you'd think that was used for rebellion. Take that stuff, melt it, and throw it away and bury it and get rid of it. Instead, no, this became holy. They used this with some pure intention. And maybe this is also helpful, when we see people doing what we think is wrong. And I think all of us probably think we see people doing things that we think are wrong all the time. It's like, how could they do that? Is to try to get into the heart of what might be motivating somebody, even if they've taken something in the completely inappropriate direction. The people at the core have a motivation that usually reflects something interesting, honorable, or true. Now, they might deserve death at the same time because they did something really wrong, but their intentions and what they were trying to do, that there could be something, a kernel of something that is holy there. Sometimes I see me doing something. Yeah, sometimes I see me doing something wrong too. What do I do with that?
Not you.
Hey, I had good intentions. Usually we're more charitable with ourselves than with others. We're very quick to point out how somebody else is doing things wrong and that their intentions are terrible, that they're a horrible person, they're scum of the earth, and I can't be seen with them, and I'm unfriending you on Facebook, and I'm never texting you again, or whatever. It's like, don't be so quick. People, most people, unless they are really bona fide psychotically irrational, are doing something, they're trying to achieve something. It's kind of like when you always say, this isn't the same comparison, like when a child throws a tantrum or is acting out, they're usually trying to communicate something. They're not doing it in the right way, and they're causing a lot of damage and destruction, but they are trying to communicate something if we could figure out what it was and help them find a way to do it in a way that's productive. So that's, it's a huge challenge. Being a person is a huge challenge. And if it's a challenge for us and we think we're doing pretty well, imagine how it is for the rest of the world. And at least we have the Torah to guide us, and we have a tradition to guide us. We have a framework to guide us. I don't know what everybody else out there is doing. I don't know how they find their path. I don't know how they find their compass of what to do. Most people are acting just purely on whim, and they're worshiping whim. I feel like this, so I'm doing this. It's like, okay. But going back to how we dress on the plane, it's like doing things by whim. I don't know what that in the end gets you. Usually it gets you a very zigzaggy life, and not a lot of payoff on that. So our goal is to be what's called yashar, is to go straight as much as possible. Andy, yes, you want to unmute, or you just think about it?
I'm confused when you said Korach will be Moshiach. Moshiach will be.
Oh, thank you. Not that thank you. He will not be Mashiach. He's associated with Mashiach time. The times of Mashiach is like when the Korach approach is going to work. It says, because when Mashiach comes, it says there won't even be teachers anymore. I'll be out of a job. It says that because the whole world will be filled with knowledge of Hashem. Nobody will have to say, can you teach me something? It's like, I'm good. And not just like from a place of arrogance, like, oh, I'm good. It's like, no, everyone will be filled with knowledge of Hashem. But until then, we need whatever. It's like the same thing. Yeah, it's true across the board. The world in its perfected state is going to look different. So that's what that means, that Korach is associated with that messianic times, not that he himself will be Mashiach, because he's from the wrong tribe. The Mashiach has to come from the tribe of Yehuda. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
sure. Anybody else? Any other comments, questions? All right, it's so nice to see all of you. Thank you for joining me, and I wish you a good Shabbos, and may your summer months, your summer weeks, summer days be fruitful for you. And you know, I'm not a big sports enthusiast, and I remember like when there would be games on in Denver, like everybody's like spending hours and hours watching TV for a game, and I'm like, I felt like I gained time because I didn't care about the sport. I'm like, everyone else is investing like 4 hours in something. I feel like I just gained 4 hours because I'm not invested in that. So same thing is true with the summer. Everybody else is checking out. And so check in. Check in and you'll gain your summer months and you'll have something to show for it. Remember, like, growing up, they would always have the summer reading program. Your parents would do anything to get you to do something productive over the summer. Because we're like, I don't know what to do. I'm bored. Because now kids have their phones, so they're not bored. I'm bored. I don't have anything to do. So it's like, do something productive. This is the time, is the summer. And it doesn't hurt to make yourself a chart. Just saying. So, and to reward yourself with treats or whatever it takes, just like you would do with children who are on summer vacation who are unmotivated, because being hot and being relaxed is unmotivating. And so we need to actually do something to take the reins in our hand and do something productive. So hopefully we will do that and we'll make progress, and who knows, God willing, we'll come to the end times. It says all of the times of Tammuz, we're going to be in a few weeks, we're going to be less than a few weeks, 2.5 weeks. We'll be at the 17th of Tammuz, which will be a fast day, and we'll begin the 3 weeks and the cycle going to Tisha B'Av. So Tammuz and Av that are going to have this down feel to us as we get into that space are eventually going to be Yom Tovim. It says eventually those are going to be holidays. And you thought you had a lot of holidays to get ready for now, just you wait until Mashiach comes. You're going to have a lot to celebrate, and we're going to be celebrating the 17th of Tammuz. We're celebrating the Tisha B'Av, and we're going to have a good time.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, ladies, very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good job.
Hi, Darlene.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
It's good to see you.
Israel, Houston, and Denver.
Thanks.
To see you all.
Bye.
All right, thank you.
Hey, Janice.